Good morning, afternoon, and good evening, or indeed, to anybody, a big thank you for joining us today. By way of introduction, my name is Bob Fedorcio, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Vertigo Ventures based in the UK. There is a slight change in our plan in that I will now be hosting the event as our CEO, Laura Tucker, is unable to attend. It's really great to have so many of you from across the world joining us for our second annual Impact Symposium, and we're very excited to welcome a fantastic lineup of international speakers for you today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we kick things off, so I'll give you a few moments to read that before we get into it. I'll also give you a brief introduction as to who we are before handing over to our keynote speaker. At Vertigo Ventures, we believe in the words of Lord Kelvin that if you can measure it, you can manage it. For that, we aim to help create a sustainable future through using impact to track and understand the real-world outcomes of activities by reporting on them. On the next graphic, you'll see that you'll be able to watch this on catch-up if you're interested. But in short, we help organizations identify, capture, and demonstrate their impact. We do this through our software products and also consultancy, training, and e-learning through 5 continents. Our Impact Tracker product is used by several thousand academics and research managers across the world and 70 or so universities and funders. We are the founding partners of the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, now just about to enter into its 4th year, and continue to support it as it grows at 30% in terms of increased participation year on year since its formation. You'll see throughout this event that we're encouraging you to get involved in our newly launched trackimpact.org, which is a free collaboration platform. So far, we have academics worldwide publishing their projects into the public domain. You'll have plenty of time to look over the platform, but its purpose is to help encourage collaboration in action and to make research accessible to everyone, everywhere. This leads me onto the theme of this year's event, which is collaboration in action. We can see from our recent Impact Landscape survey some of the expectations of COVID's impact on collaboration. While COVID was initially thought to be a leveler, in reality, it has only worsened the inequalities. That's made worse by the reality that even before the pandemic, we were a long way from achieving the UN's SDG target of 2030, with some even estimating being a quarter of a century behind. And needless to say, we're all aware of IPCC's Code Red report and the slew of recent news articles about extreme weather events. But the event today is designed to look at practical solutions, and our speakers today all have fantastic experience in making a real difference despite the obvious challenges. I think I've said enough. And so I'd like to now take the opportunity to welcome our first speaker of the day, Maki Katsuno Hayashi Kawa. She's the Director of the Division for Education 2030 at Unesco. Great to have you, Maki, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. I hope everyone can hear me well. And thank you very much for the kind introduction. Distinguished speakers and participants, a very good morning from Paris, where I am, and also, of course, good afternoon, good evening to anyone around the world. It's a great pleasure for me, an honor for me to be joining you all today for this Vertigo Impact Symposium 2021. May I first express my sincere thanks to the organizer, Vertigo Ventures, for inviting UNESCO to deliver this keynote as a humble contribution to stimulate later exchange of thoughts and experiences by higher education institutions, in advancing the mission of SDG 4 in education, as well as all the other 16 goals of Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. Now, I would like to share my screen with my PowerPoint slides. So let me try with, hopefully it will be successful. Okay, I hope the screen is clear. Now, while I believe the audience today here will be quite familiar with the Sustainable Development Agenda and its 17 goals already, may I just take maybe a few minutes to revisit our mission for education and highlight the centrality of education goal, especially SDG 4, where here you see in front of you, for the achievement of the entire agenda. The SDG 4 is indeed an ambitious goal, particularly given the much broader scope that it addresses to ensure that this goal on education is a universal agenda. The bottom line is that, of course, we do not leave anyone behind in the pursuit of realizing the right to education for all. And of course, based on the principles of inclusion, equity, and gender equality as fundamental human right. Now, the SDG 4 is really ambitious because it needed to ensure back in 2015 that it becomes a truly universal agenda relevant to all countries, regions, and people. And as a result, it is much more comprehensive, more outcome-oriented, and most importantly, the goal with its 10 targets are more interlinked and integrated with other goals. And of course, in our interest here, that it is also the first time that even all the levels of education were reflected equally under the same goal for quality inclusive education. Now, this is really just to demonstrate how the SDGs are closely interlinked. And here I put education at the center for obvious reasons, a bit biased. You can, of course, turn this upside other way around, but if you put education at the center, you can see how this web demonstrates that all of the SDG 4 targets connect with the other SDGs or their respective targets. And in many cases, the link works both ways. This web graphic just simply tries to imply or show that we will not be able to achieve SDG targets in one area if we are not able to address the issues at the other end of the line. And hence, even putting education at the center means that we should also be always looking at the other goals, how they are actually moving forward, and to see that how education can not only contribute to achieving the other goals, but also to see how the achievement in other goals can also contribute to advancing the education goal as well. Now, if we zoom into higher education, given this interlinkage and a mutual impact that these goals have, we believe that universities and particularly higher education institutions have really critical role to play in the achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Not only are higher education institutions mentioned specifically at the third target of SDG 4 on education, their influence extends across all the goals through teaching and learning, research output, and campus initiatives. Now, higher education institutions facilitate social, environmental, and economic development. They're one of the most significant incubators of ideas and solutions to global problems, and their central position amongst networks of government, civil society, and industry partners means that they have vast potential to generate positive impacts. And since the international community of member states came together to agree upon the 2030 Agenda in 2015, some higher education institutions have since established campus greening initiatives to improve their internal sustainability, while others have implemented community outreach programs like students groups or research innovation hubs to contribute to the agenda. So we see many higher education institutions taking a lot of proactive initiatives to contribute and engage in advancing the goals. Now, most universities seem to be working on SDG 4 education. Of course, it is about quality education, and which is an objective directly related to all the university mission. But then they also contribute to other goals, as I just mentioned earlier. Now, UNESCO, in partnership with the University of Bergen, we have established a group called the Global Independent Experts on the Universities and the 2030 Agenda. And this group has been producing a report on how higher education institutions are contributing or engaged in advancing the SDGs since 2018. From their report, we find that beyond, of course, SDG 4 and education, many higher education institutions are engaged in the work that contributes to advancing various SDGs. Here, in particular, we see that they're contributing to advancing SDG 7 on clean energy, or SDG 8 on decent work, 9 on industry innovation, SDG 11 in sustainable cities, which is very big, and also on SDG 12 on sustainable consumption. But we also see that there is less engagement, but of course this is purely restricted to this report, that there is less engagement in or contribution to some other SDGs, for example, concerning SDG 1 on eliminating poverty, maybe because the scope is so broad and vague sometimes, or SDG 5 on gender equality, which we find that there are a few universities who are working specifically on SDG 5 as their mission. Now, With regards to other goals like SDG 14 and 15, life underwater and life on land, there seems to be less focused. These are less focused areas, although we are very clear that universities work a lot in these particular thematic areas for research and knowledge exchange. So we're wondering why this data is like this. But we will continue to monitor and see exchange with universities on how they contribute to the SDG goals. Now, I just kind of jump to present the current landscape of the global cooperation in education, SDG 4, Education 2030. And I think this is quite important because we are, in fact, trying to kind of going through the first 2 years of this COVID-19 pandemic and trying to transition into a more transformative era that is coming up in the coming month. Here in this slide, I tried to first roughly summarize the context and also to provide the rationale to this ongoing collective effort with the international community to strengthen and improve this mechanism to coordinate better around global cooperation education and to accelerate the recovery and progress in SDG 4 towards 2030. Now, already by 2019, and that was when the SDG 4, the fourth goal on education, was globally reviewed at the high-level political forum of the UN. We knew that SDG 4 was not on track. Of course, it was not only SDG 4, but that was our focus at the time, implying that the cooperation, the mechanism that was trying to bring all the global education stakeholders together to collaborate and cooperate, and that mechanism that was put in place in 2015 in line with this Incheon Declaration on Education 2030 was not really effective enough to meet the expectations that we held in 2015. Now, SDG 4, the agenda, educational goal aiming to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, has not been spared from the COVID tragedy. On the contrary, the education sector was hit badly, as we all know. It led to the largest disruption in learning in recent history. And at the height of the pandemic, schools, universities, and other learning institutions were closed in more than 190 countries, affecting over 1.5 billion learners. That means 91% of the world's school population were not able to go to school. The global health crisis exposed the inherent fragility of national education systems. It outlined the progress achieved, outlining the progress achieved to date that remains fragile and could be even reversed without targeted remedial action to respond to the application of the silent pre-COVID-19 education crisis. As I said, by 2019, we were already aware that we were not on track. The COVID-19 really risked us to reverse our progress, even the modest progress we were making by then. So, and we just want to make sure that we do not return to the pre-pandemic pathway, as we may also lose the decade of progress made. So, of course, at that point, into end of 2019, beginning of 2020, the UN Secretary General himself echoed this concern, referring to the impact of the COVID-19 on education, on schooling as a generational catastrophe. And if we see children and youth falling behind in their learning, the crisis is expected to have lasting impact, especially if longer-term effects on economic development and future earnings are taken into account. So given this background, the international community entered the last decade of SDGs, the last 10 years of SDGs that are supposed to become the decade of action for sustainable development, by trying to cope with the COVID-19 emergency. And this generated a crisis that went far beyond just the tragic deaths of millions. Now, COVID-19 affected each and every one of us, but the most vulnerable and disadvantaged populations across the world, in particular, highlighting once more the interconnectedness of societies, but also that of all 17 SDGs, that the achievement of which is more than, of course, ever before intertwined. The global health crisis brought about the largest socioeconomic disruption in decades, and it amplified pre-crisis inequalities and fragilities within across countries even further. So it has put hard-gained progress in the field of poverty reduction, the alleviation of zero hunger, decent work, economic growth, and the entire 2030 agenda. And we feel that now even more education plays an important role here. As I said, the impact of COVID-19 on education sector overall has been disastrous. And also it had specific impact on the different sectors and levels of education. And here I am just kind of summarizing the 10 key findings of a survey UNESCO conducted specifically to understand the COVID impact on higher education sector as well. And this was a survey specifically addressed and conducted through our UNITWIN UNESCO chairholders, their institutional responses to the impact of COVID-19, mainly addressing how the higher education institutions responded to remote learning strategies, platforms, admissions assessments, or research activities and networking student support. We had about 65 countries submitting responses, and 57 of them were valid and were applied to this analysis. The report is available online. And but of course, most of the responses came from high-income countries in Europe and North America. So of course, it's kind of difficult to generalize these key findings, but I think there are many commonalities that are found, one or two or even three of them around the world. But these 10 key findings for the assessment, basically in terms of access to education, equity and quality concerns, university operation, national challenge, emerging issues, strategic responses, have been found to be demonstrated not only in higher education institutions, but also at other levels of education in terms of teaching quality, how to cope with remote learning as such. And UNESCO has been also continuing further surveys on the national response on the post-COVID-19 situation, together with UNICEF, World Bank, and OECD at the moment. The fourth iteration of the survey should be coming out very soon by end of October. But anyway, I think the survey findings overall demonstrated that there is a major shift in the mode of delivery from in-person to remote teaching and learning, a rapid digitalization of education, and the challenges presented by the shift in the mode of teaching and learning at the higher education institutions around the world. And we would like to be monitoring more on how the institutions will be coping and advancing and innovating and learning lessons from the experience we have over the last year and a half. Oops, sorry, excuse me. Now, we have, of course, as the world been, focusing immediate public health, economic and social welfare responses, education has and continues to be at considerable risk because it tends to be overshadowed despite its role as a powerful and effective driver of economic recovery in the short term, but also for sustainable development and transforming our societies in the longer term. So, of course, COVID-19 was a real wake-up call. It reminded us that education is a catalytic force for peace, equality, human and planetary well-being, and as well as economic growth, peace, and justice. So I guess after a year and a half, challenging month, the message of the pandemic to the education sector is very clear. Without the protection and promotion of education as a fundamental human right, a public good, an enabler for progress toward all 17 goals, we will fail to meet our promise of leaving no one behind by 2030. Now, as shown earlier, the pandemic caused huge disruptions to education, and it put under threat the progress made over not only the first 4 years of SDG 4, but even those achieved during the Education for All, or MDG, the Millennium Development Goal years. And since we had started to monitor and track school closures, we know that the world have been really trying to catch up with the learning losses, the school closures, and renewing commitments to advanced education SDG 4. In fact, the crisis situation kind of forced the global education community to quickly mobilize and galvanize coordinated support much faster than ever before, and to forge new partnerships to respond to the crisis together, which has also created a momentum to rethink the way we have been working. The immediate response to the impact of the pandemic and to support countries in their efforts to mitigate the impact of school closures in 2019-20 was that we had created was through the creation of a global education coalition as a platform for collaboration exchange to protect the right to education during this unprecedented disruption, and to make sure that we make sure that learning never stops. In the absence of a more effective coordination and partnership mechanism at a time of crisis, This Global Education Coalition really presented a new model of education response. It mobilized actors and resources for unified response, and particularly matching on-the-ground needs with global and local solutions. And you can see that this is a group of multi-stakeholders, not only from the UN system, but also private sector, media partners, civil society, nonprofit organization, networks, and associations. And this platform today brings together more than 180 members, and they are all kind of connecting teachers and also institutions together, collaboration with these partners. And we also have 3 flagships under this coalition around the connectivity issues, around teachers, and gender. Now, within and beyond the Global Education Coalition, of course, a need to respond to global education crisis has also led to various other partnerships for joint actions. And it was done in a very short time frame, especially among the multilateral organizations. Now, in order to monitor impact and response, there's been policy guidelines and frameworks developed, a joint initiative to make sure that there will be targeted intervention support. There has been joint mobilization of resources, and also making sure that we secure external financing for education recovery as much as possible as a priority mission for the international community. Meanwhile, as we were all working under a new partnership set up to respond to the COVID-19, we have also started to realize how much the established or the international education architecture that was put in place in 2015 was actually not working at all. And we saw there were like growing proliferation and fragmentation in the global support to education in general, which of course resulted in inefficient use of resources, duplication of efforts, and persistent data gap for effective monitoring and accountability. There were also misalignment between aid to education and national priorities needs. The new way of collaboration and innovative partnerships, as demonstrated, for example, by the Global Education Coalition for Joint Actions, which was, of course, essentially a collective response to the pandemic, was now viewed as a kind of a key to enable progress towards SDG 4 beyond COVID-19 as well. And there has also been various regional level cooperation being advanced on this occasion. But of course, in anticipation of many future crises, economic recessions, or other factors that could demand reinforced cooperation, such as digital inclusion, we were put to realize that we needed to build on this momentum to radically transform the way we work. We mobilize how we mobilize substantial resources in order to achieve the education goals within the remaining years of the decade of action to deliver on SDGs. Now, the shared momentum and commitment created through the COVID response was elevated at the 2020 Global Education Meeting that was held in October 2020 last year. The 2020 GEM, in short, adopted 5 priority actions for acceleration of recovery by end of 2021, and also recommended the international community to embark on a collective consultation process to rethink, reform, and strengthen the global cooperation mechanism in education. This commitment enshrined in the 2020 GEM Declaration mandated UNESCO to lead a consultation process to elaborate a proposal to effectively steer and coordinate a global education cooperation mechanism, including by strengthening the existing SDG Education 2030 steering committee that was put in place in 2015. And in the follow-up to this 2020 Global Education Meeting, UNESCO led a broad co-creation process engaging member states, partners, key stakeholders over the last 9 months, which has culminated into an elaboration of a concrete proposal for a more effective global cooperation mechanism, which was adopted this year in July at the 2021 GEM. Now, what the improved global cooperation aims to now achieve, and also to inform further improvement of the structure of cooperation and coordination are the following. We want to strengthen the authority of the existing coordination platform to guide agenda and setting the agenda setting and provide policy direction, to enhance mutual accountability of stakeholders through improved data and effective monitoring with benchmarking, and thereby holding development partners and national governments both accountable to the course of action or interventions that are taken in the cause of SDG 4. to increase and effective allocation of financed education, both domestic and external, to strengthen intersectoral collaboration and partnership, and to enhance exchange, compilation, and consolidation knowledge and evidence, where we feel that higher education institutions and research institutes will contribute a lot, and to bring greater efficiency, stronger synergies, and better delivery at the country level. And of course, that would mean that coordinated support for country capacity support. Now, the strengthened or renewed global cooperation mechanism has two purposes, a dual purpose, to create a strong overall enabling environment for faster country-level progress towards SDG 4. But at the same time, we also need a time-bound acceleration initiatives as developed by different coalitions, partnerships, or group of countries and international partners with different milestones to be monitored across and against until 2030. Of course, the focus was not to really create new initiatives in most cases, but to build on, amplify, and scale up the initiatives that are already going on and developed by different partners and coalitions that exist today. And based on the expected contribution of this new cooperation at the global level, we have identified 3 functions that could be proposed for the improved cooperation mechanism. And that will be to promote evidence-based policy formulation implementation, to monitor progress, improve availability and use of data, and to drive financing, mobilization, and improve alignment. And we're trying to align the different priorities, particularly around the multilateral organization, to be able to align our efforts and move towards more coordinated and collective and joint efforts around these 3 key functional missions or pillars that we have to pursue for the remaining decade of the SDGs. Oops, sorry. So through its dual purposes and the 3 functions that I just explained, and there is going to be a structure that is going to be put in place very soon. By November, we will be announcing a new kind of committee that will be monitoring our efforts, the new collective global efforts to coordinate better on education and to allow a greater impact and more effective delivery through this delivery towards Education 2030. It would also allow to position ourselves to promote and protect education as a core pillar of sustainable development through a more intersectoral approach and bringing the expertise, knowledge, and resources of key stakeholders together for better cooperation. So we are also making sure that the new collaboration and coordination mechanism will not be just limited to the education sector, which will be very inward-looking in the current context, but to be also reaching out to the other sectors to see and also realize and in reality put in place the intersectorality, the linkages between the SDGs as well. So 1 year into COVID-19, countries and the international community continue to face major challenges in ensuring learning continuity. And we certainly need to focus on the urgent recovery priorities, including getting all learners back safely into school that are supportive and inclusive, recovering their learning losses, and supporting and empowering teachers, and particularly the most vulnerable and marginalized groups. We have learned from this crisis that education touches upon everyone's life in every family, community, and country. And so solutions were found and best delivered when we worked in collaboration and in coordinated manner at all levels. And there's so much we can actually learn from this different initiatives that were emerged over the last year or year and a half. And he has also taught us that intersectoral and interdisciplinary approach is key to success of any education interventions. We also realize that we need to further improve the quality and availability and the utilization of data, because these will only be, we will have to have these good quality data to be able to inform our policies and for policy to be able to define where the priority financing should be placed in education as well. So with this, I think we have still a lot of challenge ahead of us, but we are trying to make even a small step ahead in order to recover from the current pandemic crisis and to ensure that education becomes transformative for everyone's life and society. I think this is the last slide. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. We'll just switch back. So yes, so thank you, Maki. That's some fantastic insights, and I think it's inspiring to see the progress you've made towards SDG 4.3. So, continuing our theme of education and the SDGs, I'd now like to introduce our next speakers, this time from Amrita University. We're delighted to be joined by Professor Raghu Raman, who's the Dean of the Business School, and Professor Manisha Ramesh, who's the Provost for Amrita University and the UNESCO Chair, Experiential Learning for Sustainable Innovation and Development. Amrita University made a splash earlier this year by being the highest ranked Indian university in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings. So we're really looking forward to hearing their SDG stories. So let me just hand over to Raghu and Manisha for this point on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Good afternoon from this Indian subcontinent. It's a little 2:15 here. And of course, more regards and thanks to Laura. And I still remember our first meeting with Laura back in Florida when she had made the first presentation with Duncan Ross.
Yes.
This entire idea about impact rankings. And since then, it has been a very beautiful journey. 4 editions completed, over 1,500 universities. So very, very laudable work from Laura and her team at Vertigo Ventures. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
And what we thought we'll do is we'll divide our session into 2 parts. I'll just give a brief overview of the Amrita University and what is so special or unique that we feel it is about us. And then we'll request Professor Manisha Ramesh, who's the provost, and she's also the chair on sustainable development and experiential learning, to give us more details on the how we have approached UN SDGs. With that, I will share my screen. Okay, I need to be given privileges to share. Okay, so this is my screen. Okay, one check before I start. You can see my screen. Fantastic. And so this is our beautiful headquarters, or one of the earliest campuses of Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham. It is quite a green campus. 4 years in a row has bagged the award for being the greenest campus. So I welcome each and every one of you when you get an opportunity to visit our Coimbatore campus. In contrast, this is another campus where I spend most of my time. For those of you who are wondering, the map of India, this is the southern tip of India in the state of Kerala, called God's own country. And those buildings that you see is our second campus, nestled among a lot of coconut trees. In fact, there are more coconut trees than human beings here. And of course, a very beautiful backwaters by the side. Once again, a very warm welcome to each and every one of you to this Amrita University presentation. Amrita has a very simple vision and mission, yet very powerful. And we call it an education for life and an education for living. And education for living is very important. You know, only when you're able to afford that living for yourself and to your nears and dears, then you're able to move on. But we also feel the education is not just to create people who can understand the language of machines. At university, we believe and practice that the purpose of education should also impart a culture of heart, a culture based on enduring values and inner strength. We call it an education for life. At Amrita, we are, I would almost say, obsessed with research for societal impact. And yet, we also take into consideration how much of this research have been able to serve the lowest and the most vulnerable state of society. And we believe this is like a gold becoming a fragment. And we call it compassion-driven research only because we feel the head and the heart, when it goes together, that is where the gold becomes a fragment. And of course, the world is increasingly flat. As much as India, the nation, is a priority for us. Meaningful collaboration with world-class universities to have global impact is as much an important mission for us. The university is fairly young. It's about 18 years young now, and 2003 we started. And one major decision our chancellor took then was, rather than being a single discipline university like the IITs, which is technology, engineering, or the Indian Institute of Management, which is more management business focused, we would be a multidisciplinary research intensive university. So at Amrita, you would find all disciplines in management, humanities, social sciences, all forms of engineering, physical sciences, life sciences, nanosciences, and we have a very large healthcare presence, including the medicine, the traditional medicine, which is the Ayurveda, dentistry, nursing, and pharmacy. And what this gives us is a tremendous opportunity to the faculty and the researchers to look at major societal changes, which is at the intersection of many of these disciplines, and which is what we believe has led to some of our successes in a very short time. There are 6 campuses spread across India, and there's a 7th new campus that is coming up, about 220 programs, 20,000 students, and 15 schools. There are 5 strategic pillars that drives the Amrita performance. I would like to mention 2 of them. The first one is around the international collaborations. In fact, Professor Manisha is the Dean of International Programs, who has worked very hard to build these collaborations with top 200 plus universities in the world. And this takes several forms. It could be as simple as student mobility from both sides. It could be faculty exchanges. It could be joint research centers, adjunct faculty, joint PhD programs. And so we have taken international collaborations quite seriously. And as you can see, at the top ranked world-class universities, we have collaborations with them. The second strategic pillar that drives Amrita's performance is in the interdisciplinary research. We are happy. We are also equally humbled that we have several of our initiatives which have been either the world's first, or the Asia's, or the India's. The first one is an IoT system for early warning and detection of landslides. This is the first ever system that is fully deployed in the hillsides of Himalayas, and with a little over 180 sensors deep buried in the soil, able to detect the various soil conditions and accordingly give an early warning. And several such warnings have been issued as recently as the July of this year, and then lives have been saved. A second such installation is also happening. We have a very large medical presence. We perform finest surgeries and organ transplants, but that one that stands out is in terms of hand transplants and limbs. And trying to perform a surgery at a lower arm transplantation is one kind of a challenge, but when you have an upper arm, a double hand transplantation, a man to a woman, all those things, the complexities exponentially increase. And our surgeons have been able to do these kinds of surgeries. And we also have a very unique a program or an application of technology, haptics, which is the forced feedback. And its application is mostly found in high-end robotics. But what we have done is we have looked at an interesting problem of sanitation for women and have actually trained women using haptics to learn plumbing and masonry and be able to build toilets, which is one of the major sanitation challenges in developing nations like that. And so that is how, when I talk about compassion-driven research, it is about the intellect, but at the same time also putting the heart together with this one. And these are some other fine statistics about our research publications and citations. I think we are also one such university in India which has got 2 UNESCO chairs. One UNESCO chair is on experiential learning for sustainable innovation, and there is a second UNESCO chair on gender equality and women empowerment. The result of all of this is recognition both at the national, regional, and at the global level. We are the 4th best ranked university in the country, and the Times Higher Education THE puts us as #1 private university in India. And we are also being selected as an institution of eminence. 10 such institutions have been selected in India to be developed into a world-class university. And more recently, there is a global recognition for the noble vision we have around to have research that impacts a society. And this was an event that happened at United Nations. This was the first one with on an academic impact technology for sustainable development. And this is our chancellor, who's the world's foremost humanitarian. And this is what set the ball rolling for a very unique initiative from Amrita called Living Labs, which Professor Manisha will be talking about. I would like to quote what our chancellor said. Today, the universities are ranked mainly based on funding, the number of papers they publish, and their intellectual caliber. But along with that, we should also consider how much of the research can serve the lowest and the most vulnerable strata of the society. Only by strengthening the base of the society does the edifice grow healthy and strong. And this is what led to this program called Living Labs, which is actually a program that we started with a focus on our own students, but now it has attained quite a bit of international dimensions with a focus on UN SDGs. So I will stop here and invite my colleague, Professor Manisha, to take over and walk us through how this Living Labs programs have been institutionalized across all of America. Over to you, Professor Manisha.
Thank you, Dr. Rekhu. Thank you, everybody, for inviting us to join this forum. We look forward to discuss the details. I think I will need a permission to share the screen. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, I'm able to.
So thank you, everybody. So as Dr. Rekhu has mentioned, I will talk a little bit about how Amrita University has taken up the championing sustainable development into an educational sector itself, how a unique factor has been brought in and how the students, faculty, and the stakeholders has been brought in the whole process. What made us to think about it is the largest thing which has hit us while we were working as an education institution is the widening gap which we see between science and technology are fast advancing, but at the same time, the quality of life and environment are rapidly degrading. Another major factor is, even though all this are happening, the younger generation, which is our future, who are unaware of this factor itself of this widening gap. So we wanted to bring in a program which will basically provide an opportunity for the students and faculty to understand the real world challenges and take forward the initiative to bring in sustainable innovation. So the question which we were trying to address was, how can we translate the advances to uplifting the villagers at the bottom of the pyramid and create a sustainable future for all? Who has brought in this whole initiative is our Chancellor, Amma. She's known as Sri Mata Amritantamai Devi and well known as Amma. And I will just quickly show you a short snippet from one of her talk given at United Nations in the year 2015.
ഞാൻ ചെറുപ്രായത്തിൽ ഗ്രാമത്തിലാണ് ജനിച്ചത്. 1000 വീടിനോട് ഒരു പൈപ്പേ ഉള്ളൂ. രാവിലെ വെള്ളത്തിൽ നിന്നാൽ രാത്രി വരെ നിന്നാൽ ഒരു കുടം വെള്ളം കിട്ടുള്ളൂ. അപ്പോൾ കിട്ടുക തന്നെയില്ല. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് മുന്നോട്ട് പോയത്. അങ്ങനെ വളർന്ന് ഞാനായതാണ്. ഇപ്പോഴും വണ്ടിയിൽ യാത്ര ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ റോഡിൽ എവിടെയെങ്കിലും പൈപ്പ് പൊട്ടി വെള്ളം പോകുന്നതുകൊണ്ട് ശരീരത്തിന് വ്യക്തമാർന്ന് വന്ന പോലെ തോന്നും. വല്ലാണ്ട് വിഷമം തോന്നും. ഓടിച്ചെന്ന് ആരെങ്കിലും കണ്ടു ശരിയാക്കിയെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ വിഷമിച്ച് നിന്ന് ഇങ്ങനെ അങ്ങോട്ടും ഇങ്ങോട്ടും ശ്രദ്ധിക്കും. അപ്പോൾ എന്താണ്, എനിക്ക് ഇല്ലാണ്ട് വളർന്നുകൊണ്ടാണ് ആ ഭാവം കൂടുതലും എനിക്ക് ഫീൽ ചെയ്ത് ഉണ്ടാകുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ അതുപോലെ നമ്മൾ വെള്ളത്തിൻ്റെ കാര്യം എപ്പോഴും ഇല്ല വെള്ളം, എന്നാലും അതൊരു അവയർനെസ് കൊണ്ടുവരുന്ന അപ്പോൾ ആ ഇല്ലായ്മ കൊണ്ട് നമുക്കത് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ പറ്റി. യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിലെ കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങളെ, ഈ ലോകമുഴുക്കുള്ള യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിലെ കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങളെ പറ്റുന്ന രീതിയിൽ 2 മാസത്തേക്കെങ്കിലും ഗ്രാമങ്ങളിൽ ഇൻറ്റേൺഷിപ്പിനായിട്ട് അവർ അയക്കണം. അപ്പോൾ അവർ അവിടെ പോകുമ്പം തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും പാവപ്പെട്ടവരെ കാണാനും അവർക്ക് അങ്ങനെ പേപ്പർ ചെയ്യിക്കുന്നതൊക്കെ നല്ലതാണ്, അവിടെ ദുഃഖങ്ങളൊക്കെ കേട്ടിട്ട്. അപ്പോൾ പാവപ്പെട്ടവർ കാണാനും അവരുടെ മനസ്സിലെ കാരുണ്യം ഉണരും. അപ്പോൾ എന്തെടുക്കുമ്പോഴും അവർ ഈ ആഡംബരം എടുക്കുമ്പോൾ ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു ലോകത്തിലുണ്ടെന്ന് ചിന്ത കൂടി അവർക്ക് വരും.
So that is the base for why Live in Labs has been initiated at Amrita University, where our chancellor wanted to actually bring in compassion in the student community, in the faculty community. For that, they need to actually be in the community, live in the community to understand that. And this provided us the opportunity to bring up the program Live in Labs, which is a multidisciplinary theory into practice program that facilitates the research, development, and deployment of sustainable solutions for current challenges faced by rural communities. And it's an experiential learning, which is bringing in interdisciplinary research, innovative ideas, sustainable solutions, and life enrichment training. So how is it? It is trying to solve the grand challenges and solve it and bring it as a sustainable solution. So you have the grand challenges. For solving that in the classroom, you listen and learn. In the laboratory, you explore and experiment. But where is the experience? That you need to go into the community. So this program provides them the opportunity to be in the community, embrace the community, their culture, their systems, etc., and understand the insights, and then engage with the community. Using that engagement and the learnings, they innovate and they enhance the systems, and then implement and empower the whole community to bring in the sustainable solutions. This is one short video about how the students
Rather than making a formal interview session, we joined them in the fields to help them in their farming activities, like removing weeds, sowing seeds, etc. This helped in building a good bond between the farmers and us.
So this gives them an opportunity to be one among the villager. So they live in that village, they be like a villager, participate in every activity so that they are able to understand the pain points of the community, and they understand the constraints, their resource awareness will come in, their natural requirements will be brought in, and that helps them to bring in a sustainable solution in a participatory approach with the community. So Live in Labs is a pathway for sustainable future by having the 5 key pillars. One is the participatory approach, where students, faculty, and community and stakeholders work together to build motivated actors and stakeholders. Interdisciplinary program, a curriculum has been developed and completely implemented in the whole Amrita University, in every school, including engineering, medical school, everything, and to envision for capacity development among faculty, student, and community. Amrita Seed Fund has been provided to make sure that whatever they want to bring in, they will look into the funding for design, development, deployment, and maintenance of solutions, and build them as sustainable champions for empowering the community members as champions of change and sustenance, and by having the sustainable models, the approaches for sustaining the solutions. And in the curriculum, we have actually put it with different levels so that different schools and different students at different years can take up at different levels to move from the level 1, from the rural internship, from the rural exposure, to embrace the cultural diversity, to research inquiry, to multi-stakeholder engagement, to finally to real-time deployment experiences, bringing in a lifelong learning and a social responsibility. And this is like the whole curriculum has brought in the experience, the imagining factor, the reflection, analyzing, thinking, deciding, and acting by a very unique curriculum has been brought in, which looks into the emotional, the cognitive, and behavioral sciences by building the students and faculty as a resource-aware community, community-specific designs, frugal innovation, sustainable business, knowledge society, and ambassadors for compassion and change. What does it provide to the students and the community? It's an extended horizon provided for open-minded problem solvers, versatile learner they became inquisitive researcher, multicultural adaptability and inclusive management, and higher level employability and entrepreneurial readiness. This program has been coined to look at the grand challenges of the new millennium in energy and environment, water and sanitation, health and hygiene, livelihood and skill development, education and gender equality, waste management and infrastructure, agriculture and risk management. Through this work, over the years, we have done several projects. These are some glimpses of projects which we have done, including building water distribution systems, scalable and sustainable rural sanitation model, public health awareness, empowering artists, Amrita awareness ambassadors, Saukhyam banana fiber, sanitary napkins, e-cycle. Each of these things really students work with each of these things. The students work with the community, and then they actually find out what the community needs rather than we go with a solution. That's where the change is. The problem is identified jointly, and also solution is brought in a participatory manner. So there are several areas which we have worked on, and this is considered as a best practice at Amrita. Why? Because it gives an opportunity for interdisciplinary students to work together, and they goes through a phased approach. If you see that in the phase 1, you will see that you will have challenge identification and multiple disciplines. It will go, then go into the marketing, logistics, phase 3 solar thermal system. So this is a particular program where in one of the tribal community, they have built a solution for providing solar thermal based lemongrass distillation unit, because the people in that community knew only lemongrass distillation using the firewood. When the government rule changed, they actually lost the opportunity to do the job. So they really became the poor people because they have no other skill. So students, when they lived in the community, they understood it, and they tried to approach it in such a manner that they provide a solution through solar thermal based lemongrass distillation by engaging all the different schools. You can see engineering, medicine, dentistry, management, biotechnology, social science, arts and science. And at the same time, another set of students started working and training them in a completely new arena of skill development. So they had this multi-pronged approach to provide the solution to them. Let me have it. So due to the I think the time limitation, maybe I will just skip this video which shows about the lemongrass unit which has been deployed in this village and how the students work there. Not only that, we give the opportunity for the students to understand what is the problems there, and we also give them the opportunity to scale it. This is one such case where our students in 2017 in the state of Andhra Pradesh in Gudipar Cheruva, they have built a drinking water solution for the community. And the students were so eager to contribute more, and they know that water is a bigger challenge all around the country, and they have actually brought up this with our chancellor, and then the chancellor has took it as an initiative which with 100 crore funding, with 5,000 villages, with a large number of beneficiaries. So the translation of innovation and technology adoption in a multicultural and diverse requirements was initiated, and you can see on the right side it is the Honorable President of India launching this program as the bigger initiative. And if you see that, why the solution is so important here, because we built it as a sustainable solution. And it actually built as a community level. They went into the community with the seed grant. They actually shortlisted 10,000 communities, and over the different phases, as of today, they have deployed 250 clean drinking water solutions, which include building the community itself as water-wise community. So they have built modular, affordable solution, multi-stakeholder engagement, and community empowerment by the collaboration with women entrepreneurs, local self-government and association, and ward-level water management committee, with a strategy of end-user engagement, self-governance, and customized technology by bringing in local government, community, NGO, and university together to achieve this solution, which is scalable and sustainable. Not only that, when we work with the community, it's not only that one solution becoming sustainable, we also have built the solution in such a manner that it is basically looking into all the different challenges in the community, so that we can build the community as a sustainable community to be sustainably developed. So we, in this particular community, Guptapada in Orissa district, it actually looked into health, sanitation, water, livelihood, and skill development. And our students and faculty were able to provide solution as smokeless cook stove for 32 households, toilet building for 360 beneficiaries, water distribution system for 62 households, IoT-based mushroom cultivation, and also PM Kaushal Vikas Yojana for skill development for 30 plus women trained. And by integrating the interdisciplinary people in engineering, biotechnology, social science, and management, and working together with international partners from UC Davis, Manchester, EPFL, and UB. So it gives not only the knowledge and experience by working with the rural community, it's also bringing the international experience for the students. So you bring in the best from the both sides to provide sustainable development and sustainable solutions for the community in a participatory manner. And this is actually done through a framework called experience that is student-centric, which is called Education for Life, E for Life. So in that, what we are providing is we provide the experience by giving them the opportunity to live, understand the challenges there, and from the challenges understand the opportunities. But how do they do? First and foremost is you embrace their culture, you embrace their values, challenges, and systems, and then engage them on an individual level, a group level, and a community, which will help you to empower not only ourselves, the community, and the stakeholders. And that has been done through the E4Life framework, where we actually work with the basis, the compassion-driven research and value-based education, which help us to go through the 4 pillars of engage, embrace, empower, and experience, and which is done through the teaching and learning models of participatory problem-based approaches, and also coming up with the experiential learning and immersive approaches, along with community dimension, bringing in socio-cultural, economic, political, environmental, and cultural and behavior, and approaches and models with technology, business model, social science change models, leading to innovation and interdisciplinary, thus providing a community empowerment, frugal innovation, sustainable solution. Thus the students get the wholesome learning and make the community self-reliant. So the motto of the whole program itself, to empower the community. So what it does is, through this multi-level paradigm, through the learning of the multi-level paradigm, working with interdisciplinary faculty and multi-level students from the multiple domains, has helped us to actually provide unique opportunities of more than 270 products in the community, 165 projects with 159 publications. So thus, we are able to bring in academic excellence, innovation excellence, research excellence, and global impact with working with students and faculty and international, thus making global citizens and scalable implementations by building frugal solutions and transdisciplinary solution with the base as participatory research, transdisciplinary and ethnographic and human-centered interdisciplinary aspects has been brought in to build this. And thus it has brought in an outstanding outcome with the largest funding from the university itself, leading to over the years with more than 186 international publications, leading to even journal publications of with 8.593 impact factor, which has bachelor students, multi-domain students. The paper includes bachelor students, PhD students, master students, faculty, even international students from UPC Spain. And thus and also from the multiple domain like sustainable development, civil engineering, wireless networks, chemical engineering, aerospace. It's a very unique program which is actually breaking all the barriers of the education system and provide them an opportunity to build solutions for the world and how we can change. This has helped us over the years to have this pan-India footprint in all the different disciplines. You can see the different dots in different parts of the country. All over the country, our students were able to actually work together and provide solutions to each of these areas. And all this has been worked as an interdisciplinary approach. Thus, tangible and transformative, we were able to bring in more than 145 million funding for 10,000 villages for clean drinking water for rural India. Women empowerment for 4,000 plus women trained, healthcare with free healthcare services, living labs with experiential learning, reinventing the toilet with Bill and Melinda Gates funding, and also Amala Bharatam campaign initiated by the Chancellor itself as a nationally recognized sustainable waste management campaign. All this has led to the building of the launch of an interdisciplinary school for sustainable development. As of today, there are more than 100 plus PhD students every year joins for continuing in working with these communities to build solutions for the community. So nearly 4 years they are in these communities and build solutions in a phased approach, so that they build the trust in the community and they build what they want and how the sustainable development can be brought in a phased manner. And all this has brought in a network of collaborators and leading to recognitions of having 2 UNESCO chairs, one on experiential learning for sustainable innovation and development, and another on gender equality and women's empowerment, and a national tribal center of excellence from the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. All this has led to the global recognition, the impact rankings of 2021, where we are ranked first in India and world's top in 100 as the 81st, with the 5th in the world for quality education, 8 for gender equality, 37 for good health and well-being, and clean water and drinking sanitation, 57, and 200 for industry and innovation infrastructure, and also partnership for the goals. This is a quick video about the program.
Human settlements in rural areas have always enjoyed a direct link with the surrounding natural environment. However, with rapidly depleting resources, many villages in India have entered into sustained poverty. In 2013, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, guided by its Chancellor, Srimata Amritanandamayi Devi, launched the Live-in Labs program.
We have made this program in such a manner that it has closely knitted the interdisciplinary domains together to bring in the solution. We give the students an opportunity to see the rural community, be in that environment, in the rural community, along with them, live with them. So automatically compassion will be generated in their heart, which provides them an opportunity to find out what are the challenges they are facing and how their technical knowledge can be used to provide it as a solution.
The Live-in Labs program continuously strives to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals by fostering self-reliant communities. Bachelor's, master's, and PhD students from all over the world can spend 2 weeks to 6 months working with Amrita faculty and students at one of the program sites. After a comprehensive orientation session and team formation, program participants will live in and explore the village to identify challenges and co-design a proposed solution. Implementation, evaluation, and making improvements will happen after testing the solution in the university's labs.
For any technological solution to be viable, to be sustained, you need to be with the community in designing the solution. That is one of the major things we train them in the whole process, where they work with them in coming up with the design. They look into it, what is their needs, so that they can come up with affordable, adaptable, sustainable solution, which will make sure that the technological solutions will become a success.
The program draws on principles of human-centered design for the development and deployment of sustainable solutions in the areas of energy and environment. By developing pathways to access renewable electrical energy, utilizing smart energy technology, and encouraging sustainable practices to protect the environment and conserve natural resources. Water and sanitation. By designing micro-water distribution and management systems, implementing water filtration systems, and fostering water-wise communities. These are joined by initiatives in rural sanitation, which develop sustainable models for toilet construction, fostered through democratic participation. Health and hygiene. By implementing hygiene awareness programs to increase community health and well-being, developing low-cost technologies, diagnosis units, micro healthcare management devices, a rural health management system, and epidemic management and detection programs. Livelihood and skill development. By designing immersive training programs to acquire new skills, further developing existing skills, and identifying alternative and sustainable income generation avenues, ensuring long-term viability. Education and gender equality. By encouraging gender equality in education through immersive technologies for language training, vocational training, after-school assistance, and life skill training. Waste management and infrastructure. By exploring environmentally sustainable solutions for rural waste management, such as waste-to-wealth initiatives and alternative affordable construction techniques from natural resources. Agriculture and risk management. By designing innovative and smart technologies to promote efficient farming practices, developing techniques to enhance soil and crop quality, and implementing models and systems to map and identify environmental risks. Over the years, students from multiple universities around the world have come to Amrita to participate in various Live-in Labs projects. India's villages are her life force, and they need immediate care and attention. Societies are at their most resilient when knitted closely with threads of love and compassion. So join us and let us work together to develop self-reliant villages in India. Experience is the final evidence for knowing. Shraddhavan Lapte Jnanam.
So I think it summarizes how we are trying to provide the experience to the students so that they are able to take their theory into practice and provide solutions to the community. These next few slides actually talk about which are the areas we have contributed, at least a glimpse of different areas and how many beneficiaries and which are the different branches of the has joined to work for that and the collaborating units. I will just quickly go over it. And each of these things have different projects, and at different parts of the country it was done for whether it is waste management or health or energy, etc., education and agricultural, rice cycle, agriculture economics, on-farm reservoir, groundnut agronomy, smart irrigation, all these different aspects on the disaster management, etc. All this has provided unique experience for the students and the faculty and a phased approach, a spiral to climb, so that slowly you build sustainable development in collaboration and participation with the community. So what does this provide? It provides education for life, compassion-driven approach, and global impact. These were the three philosophies which this university believes in, which is these philosophies laid by our founding chancellor, Amma. And that they learned through this program. And students really believe in what Amma is telling to us. Villages are India's foundation, her very life force, and it is the society's responsibility to take care of them. In fact, it is our village that sustain us by providing us who live in cities with the nourishment we need in order to survive. It is time to acknowledge that our villages are our very foundation, move forward with one heart and one mind to protect and serve them. By being part of this Live-in Labs program, they learned this, they experience this, and they know the value of to protect the nature, to restore the nature, and they take this as their life mission as when they are graduated as an Amrita graduate. And several students are there who has been benefited by this whole thing.
Namaskar, I'm Savita Krishna. I graduated with Bachelor's in Electrical Engineering from Amrita Bangalore in 2017. I did my final year project with Amrita Live-in Labs, and it was about building real-time monitoring systems for solar microgrids at a remote village in Wayanad district in Kerala. So, and then I didn't really know
Manisha,
that
we have a
it would be
slight
of so
time
much help
issue
to me.
there.
Okay, so I will move forward.
Then
Thank
I
you.
came to Namaskar.
Sorry.
So these are the UN SDGs where we are aligned with, and this has helped us to actually to bring in the dimensions of sustainable innovation, which will help us to have the research excellence by bringing in transdisciplinary research partnership, joint publications and joint centers, academic excellence by having dual degree programs, co-teaching, co-developing, and innovation excellence with industry partnership and productization, and global impact by frugal innovation and transdisciplinary research, leading to sustainable and scalable solutions. And thus, all these have helped take forward the sustainable development initiatives. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I think, thank you very much, Manisha and Raghu. It's really great to see the progress you're making and especially the support you're giving to the universities. Stewardship is such a key component of the theory of change around impact. So now we're a little bit behind schedule, but hopefully we'll catch up. We'll now move on to our first panel discussion of the day, addressing international collaboration. I'd like to welcome Matthew Guest, who's the policy manager at Guild HE, Rajesh Tandon, who's the Priya at the Participatory Research in Asia, and the UNESCO co-chair on community-based research and social responsibility in higher education. And also Razigan Maharaj, who's node head of the Department of Science and Innovation, and also the National Research Foundation's Center of Excellence in Scientometrics and Science, Technology and Innovation, and the founding chief director of the Institute for Economic Research on Innovation at Chhawane University of Technology. I'll now hand over to my colleague Emily, who will now moderate the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and welcome everybody to our international collaboration panel discussion today. So one of the consistent themes we've observed, not just during the pandemic, but more widely, is that there is a significant global disparity between how different regions have the ability to collaborate. Some of this comes down to perceived prestige and recognition, but there is an opportunity now to help break down these barriers. So with that in mind, I'd really love to introduce you to our speakers for this panel, Matthew Guest, Rajesh Tandon and Razigan Maharaj. So we'll start off by learning a bit more about the speakers themselves. So Rajesh, would you like to start by telling us a bit about yourself and your background, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Rajesh Tandon. I am an electronics engineer by my first degree, an MBA by my second degree, and a PhD in management. And I was a teacher of a school of management, decided to go and do some field work in rural development, only to realize that illiterate farmers were more knowledgeable than I was. And therefore, it turned on its head my understanding of what knowledge is, where it is produced, and what is the purpose of its use. So from that arose the practice of participatory research, which starts with the assumption that local communities have lived experiential and indigenous knowledge, which they use to survive, innovate, and lead their life. Therefore, external support that comes to improve their condition should start by acknowledging and valuing that knowledge and that knowledge system. Priya was founded with this perspective 40 years ago. We are now on our 40th year, and we support local organizations and grassroots groups to be able to practice this methodology. More recently, I have been, as UNESCO co-chair, working with academic institutions to train the next generation of participatory researchers who can partner with local communities in a respectful manner to be able to produce locally actionable knowledge for change. So thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. It's great to have you here. So next up, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Matthew.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I am Matthew Guest. I am one of the policy managers for Guild HE. Guild HE is the representative body for specialist and smaller universities and colleges in the UK. And we have a membership of about 55 institutions, right the way from Abertay up in Dundee through to Falmouth down in Cornwall. So a very broad geographical split. In terms of the types of specialisms that our members work in, they tend to be around agriculture, subjects allied to health and sports science, and the creative economy. So it's quite a large, diverse split of specialisms that we have. Myself, I've been at Guild HE now for 5 years. I've previously worked in a larger institution within the UK and have a background from the sort of the charity sector and an MSc in voluntary sector management. I think the topic today is going to be a really interesting one for the role that smaller institutions play in international collaboration and some of the challenges that they face as well. Some of the things that we find within the Guild HE network is that we will have institutions that might have a campus within the UK and also then be overseas. And that's been particularly challenging when we look at the different restrictions that have come around for the pandemic and where different parts of the nations are recovering or not, which I'm sure we'll get into as we go through this panel. And I'm going to leave it there and hand on.
Thank you very much. We're really pleased to have you join us today, Matthew. And finally, Razagan, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Greetings, colleagues. I hope I'm seen and heard. My name is Razagan Miraj. I studied the political economy, and as a consequence of that, focus on the relationship between science and technology and engendering innovation, bringing about change itself. And, I've been hugely privileged to have been part of South Africa's transition from a regime that was a crime against humanity towards one that seeks to improve the quality of life of all its citizens and residents. And towards that end, we are constantly experimenting and looking at better ways of mobilizing our knowledge resources towards the service of improving people's lives. I look forward to this panel as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Razagan, and thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. So now we're all introduced, I'd like to kick off this session with my first question to our panelists. So let's start with something you mentioned, sort of, Matthew, in your introduction, which is around the primary challenges that you face in your respective regions when looking to drive activities, collaboration, and indeed progress towards the SDGs. So what are some of those primary challenges that you're each facing? I don't know if one of you would like to start the conversation.
Shall I jump in since I've mentioned?
Why not?
There. As I was thinking about this before coming along to speak today, and it did strike me that actually some of the challenges that smaller institutions have, particularly in research collaboration, are very similar domestically and internationally, and it inevitably comes down to capacity. So within a small research office, you might have 1 or 2 members of staff, and compare that to some of the larger research intensives that could easily have 150 staff, and that makes a very different operation of scale. And I think it's where we see specialist institutions and smaller institutions get really good is when they are able to focus. So we'll often find where we've got members who have productive international partnerships will often be through an individual academic connection that's then been brought back into the institution rather than the institution pushing out. So I think that's one of the bits that is a little bit different within a smaller institution. I'd also touched a little bit on COVID at the moment, and I was talking to a member not too long ago who has an office run overseas. They, of course, have a UK base for delivering their courses. And the UK legislation means that at the moment you can go back to face-to-face teaching, but when you're governed from a central body that is overseas and is responding to a different regime of where you're not allowed to go face-to-face, how that actually works in practice has been particularly challenging. And it takes that time to work through. Again, when you've got smaller numbers of staff and smaller organizations, you might be able to get some of those decisions through quicker, but the challenges are still there and exist. I think the other challenge that smaller institutions generally have is around the funding side. It's very hard for them to get funding from the UK, and that's become even harder with the cutting of the Global Challenges Research Fund, which had enabled some really productive partnerships between places such as Bath Spa and Falmouth within particular specialisms. So I'll have that by way of opening.
Thank you very much. Razagin, I don't know if you want to comment on some of the primary challenges that you face in your region.
Thanks very much. And I think maybe to help us also maintain plurality of views, I want to raise things maybe at a different level from what Matthew has now suggested. Yeah, I'm sure these microdynamics at least hold, but it's important for us also to take into account the macro context that we find ourselves in. Yeah? South Africa as a country, Southern Africa as a region remain confronted by challenges of inequalities that are caused by underdevelopment, unemployment, ecological degradation, and marginalization in world systems. This persists and is being reproduced. As a semi-peripheral political economy, that's South Africa, we're surrounded by peripheral states, states that are considered marginal to the world system. And therefore productive capacities, capabilities, competences are scarce, and they remain scarce in our territories because of that. Hence, the burden of managing then and balancing between domestic demands for improvements in the quality of material existence, and I would be blunt enough to put this forward in this way, just surviving at present, is extraordinarily high inside systems that are very poorly resourced. The necessity then of contributing to sustainable development goals becomes something that's added on to national agendas. So the last point here, and I think this relates also to something Matthew has hinted at, the cutting off official development assistance. And that is to be contrasted with international indebtedness. And most of this indebtedness is due to odious obligations or conditionalities and rampant corruption within our countries itself. These adds to the pressures on national fiscuses to spend more and on a smarter basis. But I'm sorry, colleagues, for a note of pessimism, but the austerity is what looms large and prevents us, from achieving what a wonderful example shared by Amrita. If all of us operated in that way, I'm sure we'd be in a better space. Unfortunately, the way the fiscus, monetary policy, and global world system operates at the moment, we are excluded from such opportunities. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for your insights there. And finally, Rajesh, did you want to come in on this point around your experiences?
I'm going to come in between Matthew and us again, sort of a meso level. Three challenges, particularly in the post-pandemic era. International scientific research collaboration is suspect. There has been so much scrutiny of collaboration between Indian scientists and Chinese scientists in light of the spread of the virus. In fact, there was a study on bats being done in Eastern India, in Nagaland, Chinese, US, and Indian researchers, and it got so much scrutiny. So what we are witnessing is that scientific or research collaboration is no longer likely to remain an activity between researchers and their institutions themselves. There is bound to be much greater public scrutiny, and therefore the requirement of public engagement, public communication, public consultation. So this is the first challenge. Second is that most of the international collaboration emanating from Europe, UK, North America, because it is also funded from those jurisdictions, tends to start by framing the conceptual and theoretical construct and foci of research questions in advance before collaborating partners are recruited. And in my experience, a lot of time collaborating partners are merely collecting local data in order to make the project directors to comply, analyze, produce, and publish. And the third challenge is that increasingly, if we want to focus our attention on collaboration for SDGs, it has to be very contextual, very particular, very local, because achievement of SDGs, let alone their interpretation, has to be local. I am grateful to the notion that SDGs are universal, and therefore, if somebody in UK wants to do a study on innovative solutions for taking care of your own adolescent health, then I would encourage them to do one study in UK and one study in India, not just focus on India, because that is reproducing colonial practices. SDGs are universal, and adolescent health is a problem in parts of UK as much as it is in India.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those points. And I think on there, you know, in the context of international collaboration and indeed the progress towards the SDGs, I'd really like to ask you all, what do you think might help alleviate some of these challenges? So that might be, you know, things that you're looking to address yourselves, or strategies that you've seen adopted with regards to improving research collaboration in your respective areas of expertise. So maybe Rajesh, we could start with you this time.
Oh, I thought you were going to give me a break. Anyway,
I'll give you a break next time.
Happy to.
Apologies.
Happy to. I'm following a strategy, and our UNESCO chair is part of that global strategy of what we call Knowledge for Change, K4C consortiums. These consortiums are partnerships between local community organizations, local government, local business, and local academic institutions or research institutions. And this model I have developed based on the work I did in India and in some of the South Asian countries in previous decades. The idea is that local research institution, local communities, local government identify a priority SDG question that affects that community and put together their expertise, complement, and develop a partnership to produce knowledge solutions which are actionable, which are owned locally, which are acted upon by different stakeholders, and they do not remain good ideas on paper alone. And so I would encourage you to look at the Knowledge for Change collaboration consortium, which now we have 22 such hubs in 14 countries. Each hub decides to focus on a particular SDG which is locally relevant: water, gender, health, education, whichever. But they use a collaborative methodology to frame the research question and to undertake such research which can then be acted upon by various partners in the research process. And I see that as a way forward in terms of even international collaboration, because instead of defining a priori which SDG and its which indicator is relevant to me, a consultation to identify the contextual needs may build a more meaningful and practical collaboration.
Thank you. That sounds like such a fantastic initiative. So thank you for sharing that with us. Matthew, I'd like to come to you next then, around sort of what your experiences have been in regards to maybe alleviating these challenges that you've mentioned, or some of the strategies that you've seen adopted possibly across some of the institutions that you work with at Guild HE.
Thank you. And I mean, I think I'd just actually start by echoing Rajesh a bit around, it's almost that one of those challenges being the sort of the arrogance of the Western system when it comes to research collaboration. And the UK is very guilty, particularly in the way it funds overseas collaboration, of wanting to say, here you go, world, have some funding because we know what we're doing. Obviously not there, and it puts that instability in the partnership. So I think it's where some of the work and discussions that begin to take place through on that almost institution to institutional level, when you remove the funder, I think is where you can actually begin to get some of the equality and equity in the partnership from the start, as that always seems like one of the key bits to try and get right. And I think where we see smaller institutions have been able to, I suppose, address some of these challenges, it's often where they have a research office or that bit of an international partnerships office that is willing to let the academic or make the connection and then use the institution's resource to enable that connection to flourish. So we have, say, somewhere like Harper Adams University has very strong links with Malaysia in the field of agritech. And that started out on an individual relationship basis. The institution's gone, well, this actually makes sense for us, and it makes sense for the partners we're working with overseas. So I suppose it's the advantage I see in that opportunity for specialist institutions in particular, where they only have one or two disciplines that they focus on. That can actually be a way to sort of show what the offer is overseas, and where there are similar things that are taking place elsewhere in the world that an UK institution can lend its support to. And I think a lot of it is trying to get the phrasing between different parts of us within country. It kind of goes back to this bigger conversation. The way the UK government might speak about research collaboration is quite different from the way institutions will talk about research collaboration. And then that in turn is different from the way different types of institutions talk about it. So in some ways, it comes back to breaking down the language barriers as well.
Absolutely. It's all these nuances that, we really need to be aware of, I suppose. So Razaghan, I guess finally coming to you then on this question around what you think might help alleviate some of the challenges that you mentioned sort of initially there.
Thanks very much. I think, as we've now heard, and I think Rajesh has made the point quite importantly, and I hope we do take the time to embrace the idea, there's a level of humility that all of us need to proceed with. Had we had the solutions, we would have implemented it. Currently, in terms of world systems, we have solutions. Those solutions are available, except they are appropriated and turned into property that's protected behind barriers. And this is something we've also got to confront quite seriously. So at least part of that is the institutional makeup. Yeah. And I would really encourage us to push away from blaming directions for the problems we are in. Yeah. In other words, the compass doesn't have much to do with this. It is world systems. It's the accumulation of privilege that has vested in some countries and systems an overwhelming amount of privilege relative to the rest of the world. And this is something we have to come to terms with. It is our reality. We must learn from the facts itself, and through that shape theory in our praxis. So in South Africa, a significant effort has been made by our National Research Foundation, the main organization through which publicly funded research is transacted. And I really appreciate the fact that the NRF has now seen that there is a bifurcation in understanding impacts. The one is just seeking to realize an impact for the purposes of knowledge itself versus a societal impact. And these have been kept separate also because of the tools we use to identify and measure what we've achieved in those areas itself. Yeah. So it's quite good that we start combining this again. Like I keep referring, I'm so overwhelmed by the wonderful videos and what we saw earlier. It's really so optimistic. All of this is possible. Why aren't we all doing it? And that's where we need to look at our systems and the things that keep us, that prevent us from sharing in this learning that is available to us globally, but unfortunately is managed through the privilege of the property relations we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think with those systems that do seem to sort of underpin everything, it's interesting now to look at collaboration and research in the context of sort of COVID-19 and the pandemic. And as much as we all desperately want to get away from it and sort of stop talking about it now, it's still very much impacting sort of higher education, universities, research in general. So I wonder then if I move on to my next question to you all, which is really looking at, what does collaboration look like moving forward now in a world afflicted by COVID, and how have you seen new international connections being made in the current climate? What sort of innovations maybe have you seen, or different ways of working that have been particularly successful, especially over the last sort of year or two? So Matthew, did you want to go first perhaps on this one?
Yes, thank you. So it's quite an interesting one, this, as I think there have been some things that have worked really well. So in fact, this is a very good example of how we've been able to connect across different parts of the globe and have a pretty interesting conversation that might even lead to some form of other collaborations at some stage. And part of that is that you tend to find with online connection, it's a lot more directed. So you also then conversely miss a lot of what can happen in the face-to-face space of the accidental conversation over coffee that leads to something else. So there's a bit of a pro and con in there. And I think it's where we get to digital inequality that really comes through. It can be incredibly hard for countries that don't have as good internet quality to be able to take part in international conversation. And likewise, within country, those challenges can exist. So within the UK, you can be in one part of the country or in with very, very poor data connection. And it's something that we've seen, particularly on the teaching side, where institutions, of course, moved on to last year delivering online tuition. If students were from poorer backgrounds, they probably didn't have as much access to good internet or good technology to allow them to actually connect. And that's been a real challenge. We've seen it particularly within the UK, within the schools side as well. So there's a sort of the thing that we've then seen within the UK is that the government is making a very big push on being able to roll out 5G, partly in response to the pandemic. So there's a sort of a bigger country system thing that happens there. And I think where the connection is harder is when you are trying to facilitate exchange. Particularly student exchange. And I know there have been a few instances where virtual exchanges have worked quite well, particularly through the Erasmus Plus program. On the other hand, there's nothing where you can really replicate being and feeling what an institution is like to really pick up a lot of the harder to spell out cultural diversity that might exist.
Absolutely, thank you. Rajesh then, so I suppose sort of on the same point, could you maybe talk to us a bit about how Priya has adapted to the challenges of COVID over the last months?
Very interesting point Matthew has made. And this has been a challenge even for our national as well as South Asian collaboration. Where we want to collaborate is typically where digital capacities, tools, connectivities, bandwidths, systems are the weakest. We discovered by force, and I was delighted to see a couple of research collaboration where my heavy duty academic colleagues discovered by force, not by choice, that because we had built local capacities in local animation, local leaders, local citizen activists, and you could only speak to them on phone, and that too, and the only other mode of communication that worked was WhatsApp, that wretched WhatsApp. Everything else, of course, didn't work, not even Zoom or any of these WebEx or whatever, because of lack of connectivity and tools available. But because they were already capacitated and because they had a relationship of mutual trust with Priya, our colleagues who never like to start by asking local people what are the real issues in respect of communities accessing healthcare in the second wave last 6 months. They had to ask local leaders for clarification of research questions because they neither could go nor could university. So a lesson for me, and a lesson which I am sharing more widely with you all, is that investing in local leadership, in local partnerships, local relationships of trust in normal conditions is greatly valued in abnormal situations. And this is the point, first point. The second point is that you can work collaboratively where previous relationships of minimal trust already exist. Working collaboratively by meeting people digitally for the first time in your life is a hogwash, in my view. You can exchange in big citations, lots of publications and all that. But the concepts, the words, the phrases have different meaning, and that you can only understand if you had some previous relationship of trust. Otherwise, you just carry the word and assume it means the same thing to everybody. The third point I want to make, and this I'm, making after a lot of experience of both teaching and research in the last 4 or 5 months. And that has to do with that I'm getting a feeling that those of us who are responsible for learning of young people and responsible for producing knowledge for change, I think we are becoming what I call virtually lazy. We are taking advantage of virtual connectivity to become lazy in making additional effort to strengthen face-to-face and physical partnership, even where you can go. People are, and I can assure you, I am personally going to stop teaching virtually only. Unless it is a hybrid model, I don't think learning will happen. Many of my students can just switch off pretending they have poor connectivity or this or that, and they can go and cook food or smoke a cigarette or have a drink, while I am like a fool giving lecture and trying to create subgroups on Zoom, and all the members of the subgroup collude to disappear. So I want to tell you this very strongly. I've been telling my colleagues, I'm going to stop teaching only virtual things and stop doing only virtual research collaboration.
Thank you, Rajesh, for those really interesting points there, and for your experiences as well. So coming to you finally then, Raz, again, looking at the institutions that you're involved with and that you work with, what does collaboration look like, I suppose, in a world that's been so adversely affected by the pandemic?
Thanks very much. I have a lot of resonance, I should say, with Rajesh's points that he's made just now. We all feel like we're speaking to a black box that sits on our desks, wondering what's happening on the other side. And we should be reminded about why it is. So thanks, Matthew, for also raising this. The digital inequalities that confront all of us are replicated through world systems as well. But can I ask also, would we have digital connectivity without energy or electricity? And that's when we start getting closer to the problems confronting Southern Africa as a region itself, and South Africa as a country within it. So we have these huge problems. And Rajesh, if you don't mind, some of our students disappear while we are speaking to them because of the blackouts that result from us not having sufficient energy to distribute. So this forces a rethink for us. But Emily, I'd also encourage that we take a view about what the virus has actually done. Remember, it's a virus threatening us as a species. Yeah. In this, we've been forced to re-look at the social, economic, environmental, and political systems we ourselves as people have set up. And those are the things that are proving to be the hurdles. So in many instances, our lessons over the last 18 months is that we've managed to survive and get ahead in spite of many of the institutional frameworks. And that's why it's so critical that we actually respond to this, bringing about the changes at a much faster pace. We cannot afford another generation to go past for us to be confronted by this. We cannot continue with the uneven distribution of productive capacities and capabilities across the world system. If another pandemic approaches, we shouldn't then resign over 1 billion people to their fate without the possibility of being able to respond. And that's where collaboration, our humanity, should and gives us the opportunity to shine through. So I think we have learned a lot, but I really worry as to whether we are learning, as the virus is teaching us, or are we just bringing forward the things that troubled us before, and the virus gives us a neat opportunity to put it back on the agenda itself. Yeah, this is the difference between the need for reform versus the need to transform. And we can't just reform back to a system that ill-served most of the world's people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your honesty, and yeah, you've definitely given us a lot to think about today. I'd really love to sit and talk to you and sort of discuss your various experiences for much, much longer. But in the context of time, this has been a really fascinating conversation. And as I say, you've given us all a lot to think about. So we just have a couple of minutes left of this panel discussion. So I think I'll start to wrap up now. And really just to end, I'd like to ask you all sort of what your key takeaway is that you'd like to leave with our attendees today. So maybe Rajesh, if you'd like to just start with that.
My key takeaway is that we need to be more vigorous. We always talk about being rigorous, but I want to say we want to be more vigorous in finding ways to connect with people across the boundaries which have divided us in pursuit of common good. I think the stage is set, as Rasigan was saying, for us to recognize that our local solutions, independent of larger connectivity, are going to keep us in our own cocoons, but that's not going to help us. I think we need to make, therefore, more vigorous efforts in creating new ways of connecting, building the connection with unknown others, unfriendly others, unfamiliar others, and the spirit of solidarity needs to enter the collaborative research efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What about you, Rasigan? What takeaway would you like to end on?
Excellent points. And I follow in the footsteps that Rajesh has already laid out for us. Just 3 quick points. Yeah, we see the massive need, but that need has not been translated into demand. And a big part of that is because of the differences in income levels. So all of the needs cannot be translated in how we understand economic demand. That's where it's so important, this notion of solidarity and us reinvesting it. Why? Global cooperation and coordination is definitely called for, but we need to step up to it. Second point, science workers, I think, all workers in science have a much larger responsibility, as we've seen through this pandemic itself. Our privileged access to information and data forces on us a responsibility. And I'm not convinced that we've managed to, fully reconcile that. So there's a lot more effort required because of the knowledge asymmetries that we have a critical role to play to break out of. And the last one is just a quote from a recent paper just published a few weeks ago, which makes the points that our colleagues have shared. Yeah, if it's all right, Emily, can I read it just very quickly? It's a short paragraph.
Absolutely.
Understanding progress towards the sustainable development goals at a local scale is important when trying to unpack national progress. It shines a light on issues that are not picked up by national composite assessments, yet require most urgent attention. Gaps in data required to measure progress towards targets represents a serious stumbling block, preventing the creation of a true reflection of local and national scale progress. So I want to throw this up and just share the concern. We'll keep looking at aggregates, and we need to break those aggregates down into their composite or their constituent elements. That allows us to target. We will have a global solution when all our local solutions work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those comments there and that quote. I think that's incredibly important for us to hear today. So finally, Matthew, then, if you'd just like to share with us your final comment for today.
Thank you. I'm not sure how much else I can add to Rajesh and Razagan there. Really good quote as well at the end. But it did get me thinking that there's that phrase that came out around reform v transform. And I think that is a very good place. The UK government likes to talk about building back better, but it just seems to be building back the same at the moment. So what actually is the challenge that we can do within the research and education sectors to actually make some form of transformational change? And it seems to me that there's this point around open collaboration as well as open access research that feel ways where we can try and get those best ideas to actually translate, and that working together from very different perspectives is probably the way we can crack some of the hardest issues facing us.
Thank you. Thank you so much to you, Matthew, and Razagan and Rajesh for being here today and for raising so many fascinating points with us. We really appreciate you giving us your time. It's so insightful to see the potential that international collaboration can have, and I hope that everybody can take some inspiration from the points that we've discussed. So with that, I will pass back over to you, Bob, if that's okay.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you, Emily. Those were some fascinating insights. So now we come to our break. This is an opportunity to get involved in the chat, grab a coffee or tea or something stronger, perhaps. We would recommend that you take a moment also to look at some of the initial projects already starting to be published on trackimpact.org, and even sign up now for free and start following some of them, and or consider publishing some of yours, if you so please. We'll also be sharing some of the insights from our impact survey, which is about to be released. And again, just as a reminder, we are slightly over, but we can make up that time. But we are looking to start in just under 15 minutes. So that's going to be 11:15. So 15 minutes past the hour. See you then. Thank you. Okay, I think we can now start following the break. So hello, everybody, and welcome back again. So next up, we come to our cross-sector collaboration panel. While geographic boundaries are one of the challenges we're looking to find ways to break down, another is between sectors. So much knowledge, experience, and potential exists across different sectors, and we're very excited to welcome our second panel. Andy, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. It's been great to hear from everyone so far. It's been a really interesting session, and I'm delighted to introduce our next session, which is the cross-sector collaboration. And the panel we have today is firstly Dr. Sarah Foxon, who is the Knowledge Exchange Lead at Posts within the UK Parliament. We also have Dr. Stephen Hill, the Director of Research at UKRI, and we have Katrina Manville, the Policy Manager at AMRC. So thank you all very much for joining. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to sit with us in this hopefully insightful discussion. And I think it's best to begin if you each wouldn't mind just providing a quick introduction to yourselves, your institution, and your roles, and then we can get underway with some questions. So Sarah, if it's okay, I'll come to you first, if that's all right.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. And thank you to everyone at Vertigo Ventures for the invite to participate in such an interesting and enriching event this morning, or afternoon or evening, depending on where we are. So as you said, my name's Sarah Foxon. I'm Knowledge Exchange Lead in the UK Parliament. I head up a small team, which is a unit called the Knowledge Exchange Unit. And we're the team within Parliament that's really working to strengthen the exchange of information and expertise between Parliament and the research community. So as we all know, the role of Parliament is to hold the government to account, to scrutinise the government, the executive, to make sure that government is acting in the best interests of the electorate, of citizens. And so our team works to make sure that research evidence can feed into Parliament to support parliamentary processes, to support Parliament in its roles of scrutiny, legislation and debate. We do that in all sorts of ways. We provide opportunities for researchers to feed their research insights and evidence in. We train researchers in how to engage with Parliament and how to engage with policy. And we've got lots of resources to support that. And we're really there to support and make and facilitate connections between Parliament and the research sector.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sarah. And Stephen, if I could hand over to you to do the same, if that's okay.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to join in with this event today, which has been really interesting and informative and inspiring. So I'm Director of Research at Research England, which is part of UK Research Innovation. UK Research Innovation is the largest public funder of research in the UK. And within Research England, we focus activities on funding higher education institutions in England, and in particular, supporting the underpinning infrastructure and human resources that underpin an effective research system. So we're very much focused on providing funding to universities to allow them to support the research that they do and to drive forward and deliver on their own strategic priorities. At the heart of a lot of our funding streams is the notion of collaboration and partnership. And so I think it's great to be on this panel thinking about how we can get different sectors working together to address challenges like the Sustainable Development Goals. But just to give you some examples of how we seek to support, incentivize and reward partnerships through our funding, we have funding streams that complement and support research funding from other sectors. So specifically funding from research charities, which I'm sure you'll hear more about in a moment from Katrina, and from businesses. And so we use our funding to help universities to leverage that funding from other sources. We have a partnership capital funding program called the UK Research Partnership Investment Fund, where we provide capital funding, but on the condition that it's matched either by business or charities or philanthropy, again, to foster those partnership working where the university researchers are working alongside and tackling the questions that are raised by charities or business. We support the university museum sector in England, which is very important in providing conduits between universities and their wider communities. And we've also recently been supporting the linkages between researchers and policymakers through a fund specifically aimed at fostering that partnership working, and also through a specific project led by UCL, but University College London, with a number of other partners across the UK, looking to enhance policy engagement with research. So through our research funding activities, we're very strongly supportive of collaboration and partnership. But the second area, a major area of activity for us, is working with the other funding bodies in the other parts of the UK, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, to deliver the UK's national research evaluation process, the Research Excellence Framework. And our aim in that is to provide a rounded assessment of research quality in universities in the UK. And very much at the heart of that is including societal impact and the delivery of impact from research as an important part of that appraisal of research quality. And for us, high quality research is not only about its academic or its scholarly impact, but is also about the impact it has in wider society. And as part of that exercise, we have accumulated case studies from universities across the UK, which demonstrate the breadth and depth of their contributions to wider society, including, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think our mission within Research England is very much aligned to the topics of this conference, and it's great to be here and to have the opportunity to talk to you all today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Stephen. And Katrina, if you wouldn't mind just providing us with an introduction to yourself and your institution.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's been really interesting hearing some of the conversation in the last session, and I think this will pick up on it as well. So my name is Katrina Manville, and I'm the Head of Policy at the Association for Medical Research Charities. We're a membership organisation of research charities in the UK, so household names you would have heard of, like British Heart Foundation or Cancer Research UK, Welcome, but then also focusing on some of those rare diseases and niche areas where the research charity might be, only a couple of people. And we fund research in universities predominantly, but also in hospitals. The funding that AMRC members provide is about 1.7 billion a year, which is about half of all public funding in medical research. And to link into Stephen's point, we really think that the diversity of funders in the UK makes the environment quite unique for being able to tackle some of these big cross-cutting issues, and that the diversity of funders is important for achieving the impact that we see. So one of the things that we think is the sort of vital role that charities provide is about being a link to the public and to the science, as public individuals are choosing where to donate their money and what sort of things they want to prioritise. And charities are really involved in sort of all stages of the research, and I think that that's where the collaboration is key to ensure that there's patient voice in there, and the diversity of stakeholders. So just thinking through the general pathway, I think, there's bits about how you define what the research questions are and the strategies. And there you will see with a lot of the charities, the patient voice is very important in framing what type of questions they answer and what is seen as important to tackle. There's also conducting research in collaboration, and Stephen mentioned some of the partnerships where charities can provide match funding or other expertise alongside other public or private funders. And then I think it's important to think about the translation of that research. And here I think it's really important to recognise the diversity of skills that you need to achieve the outcomes that we want, and to recognize that all of those skills might not be in one individual or within one organization. And so often here with the translation of products or interventions, charities will partner alongside Innovate UK and some of the catapults work under UKRI, or different industry partners, to actually realize the benefits for patients of the basic research that has been conducted. And finally, I think there's a point around the making the research available. And I think this is a sort of contribution of all parts of the system, and where the collaboration really plays in to ensure that research is open and transparent, that it therefore isn't duplicated, or that where it is duplicated, it's to show that it is reproducible rather than it is wasted by doing things again, so that we ensure that we're spending the money in the best way. I'm sure there are examples I can give you of some of the different things that we've touched on there, but I'll stop there and we can go back for some questions.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Katrina. And we'll certainly talk about collaboration in a bit more depth in a moment. I just wanted to sort of start the session off by asking each of you what the SDGs mean to you and your respective institutions and therefore sectors. So Sarah, if I go back to you, if you wouldn't mind answering that as to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andy. So I'll come first to the organisation for which I work and which I'm representing today. And as we've said, the role of Parliament is to scrutinise government and to make sure that the government is acting in doing the best it can for citizens and for the electorate. And so the SDGs are really important to Parliament in the context of in the way that the responsibility that government has to be helping us to try and meet those SDGs. It's Parliament's role to check up and challenge and scrutinise the extent to which government is making progress on behalf of the UK towards the SDGs. So it's a topic, it's a theme, it's a framework that Parliament has engaged in through its parliamentary processes. So over the years, we've seen that we've had debates in the chamber where we've had members of Parliament talking about the SDGs, talking perhaps about specific SDGs, or talking about the SDGs more kind of globally, but also debating the UK's progress against the SDGs and the government's role in that. We've seen those debates where members of Parliament and the members of the House of Lords who are there to represent us have been talking about them. We've also seen inquiries. So in the UK Parliament, the main way that Parliament scrutinises government is through the committee system. The select committees you might have heard of. Elsewhere in the world, they're called commissions, and they're cross-party groups of members of Parliament that scrutinise a particular policy area, generally of government, of the executive. And so, and the main way that committees do that is through inquiries. So they bring together terms of reference, a series of questions around a topic that they want answers to. So that might be on a particular SDG or our progress against it. And then they'll seek evidence and insights from anybody and everybody, including academics, including the third sector, including industry. They'll seek those insights and information, and they will then respond and write a report to the government, making recommendations on how the government could perhaps adapt its way of working or conduct some new action. So we've seen committees conducting inquiries around the SDGs and around our progress against them, and holding committee sessions. So having evidence hearings where they're bringing in experts to talk about the SDGs. So there are particular parts of Parliament where the SDGs sort of form more naturally. So that might be the International Development Committee, for example. Or the Foreign Affairs Committee, and then there will be members of Parliament with particular interest who will be particularly interested in specific sustainable development goals, and there they might engage through all-party parliamentary groups, which are informal cross-party groups which tend to be around a particular subject area, and there they will be wanting to find out more, raise awareness about a particular topic. That might be poverty, that might be health inequalities, that might be education. So really, obviously we know all of the SDGs are hugely policy relevant, and so Parliament is engaging with those topics frequently and readily in different ways. Yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. And I guess I can open the question to you, Stephen. You know, how did the SDGs feature within UKRI, for example?
Yes, I'll answer that question, but I want to also make it slightly broader and talk about the university sector in that context. But I think I think the SDGs are a really useful way of framing our aims as a society. So they certainly will feature very much within the UKRI alongside other priorities about how we direct our research funding and how we shape and frame research programs across the breadth of the UKRI. So I think they're an important framing device, and I think it's really important to have something that is globally agreed, that we're all signed up to as endpoints for some of the investment we put into research, for example. So I think they're really powerful in that regard. I think they're also very clearly very relevant to a lot of the activity of our universities, both research and broader activities of universities, which I think was mentioned by the first speaker today, that we really do need to think of universities at the heart of delivering the Sustainable Development Goals through their educational work, but also through the research that they fund. And I know many universities in the UK will have goals and strategic objectives that are either directly or more peripherally linked to delivering on the SDGs. So I think that they are important from that perspective too. And I think if you look at the evidence we have around the societal impact of UK universities, particularly that comes from the Research Excellence Framework that I mentioned earlier, you can see the vast contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals that's evidenced in the case studies that are produced by universities as part of that assessment. And there was some really nice analysis done by the UK Collaborative Development on Development Research a number of years ago now, building on that case study database that we have, that shows how research can be really transformative in addressing Sustainable Development Goals. But I think one of the things I'd take away from today is that there's still very much more that we could do on that, particularly in the importance of co-creation of research and collaboration with partners globally to deliver against the Sustainable Development Goals. And I was really struck by the case study we heard from Amrita University and the depth of co-creation and collaboration that was clearly going on in that Live in Lab program. And I think there's huge amounts that the UK university system could learn from a program like that. And as far as I'm aware, there's nothing on this of the scale and depth going on in the UK in comparison with that, which I think looked absolutely fabulous. So I think, yes, Sustainable Development Goals are important for us, but there's still much more to do in terms of really using them as a framing tool.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen. And Katrina, if you wouldn't mind providing an answer to the same question.
No problem. So I would say that the charities that we represent are very focused on sort of healthy lives outcome of that, but it is both for people in the UK, where often the donors are in particular, but also overseas. And you'll see shifts in strategies. For example, the Wellcome Trust are increasingly focusing in a global way. I think there's also a growing theme of research on prevention of diseases, and I think that this fits nicely with a lot of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that there's growing awareness of inequalities, for example, ethnicity as a risk factor for specific diseases. And here I think the charities also are using their research to expand the research and service remit that they have. So using some of the results that they find in the advocacy work that they do, and in being able to present to different communities what the perhaps risk factors are that they can't alter, and therefore the need to address some of the risk factors for disease such as lifestyle.
Brilliant. No, that's great. Thank you very much to the three of you. I now wanted to move on to talk more about collaboration. And if I think a good question to start would be, if you wouldn't mind providing me with just sort of your own experience of collaboration within your institution, and some of the methods that you've used to go about collaborating with others, say within or even external to your sector. So Sarah, if I come back to you, if that's okay.
Am I going to be going first for all of the questions, Andy? That's fine. Yeah, no, go.
Oh,
no,
I won't let you go first next time. Don't you worry.
Okay.
I'll put you on the spot.
So collaboration, I think for us, we've really had to kind of ramp up collaboration. We did a survey in 2017 of the academics' barriers to engaging with UK Parliament, and we found that the biggest barrier, over half of respondents, we had, I think, 1,100 respondents, over half of respondents said lack of knowledge and information. I think up there we had the second and third barriers were lack of confidence, a perception of elitism, exclusivism, not feeling welcome. And then we had, things that affect us all, so time and priorities. But I think for us, we just have this concept that political institutions, there's a big barrier between them and us and them and the normal people, and that barrier is impenetrable and that it's not possible to connect across the two. So for us, we've spent the past 4 years really trying to address that misconception and work to break down those misconceptions and barriers, and to create means for collaboration, and not just kind of big formal collaborative projects, but also just everyday interaction and engagement. A phone call between an academic expert and a member of parliamentary staff, or the ability to be able to email each other. So we've had this kind of dual effort to put the mechanisms in place for people to be able to interact. So one thing that we did was we've created a Twitter account to share all engagement possibilities for researchers and those wanting to feed into Parliament. So putting things in place, but also addressing those misconceptions. So, we put a picture of ourselves on our Twitter account because there's a certain idea of what a policymaker might look like, but we're 3 smiley people and we want to work with you. So I think for us, it's not been so much big formal collaborations, but actually demonstrating and trying to build that freedom to be able to interact as we've said, allies all working towards the same goals, wanting to improve the outcomes for the world, which is something we see in the research community, is something we see in the third sector, and is something we see in Parliament in that role to bring about the best outcomes for society.
Brilliant. No, that's great. And Katrina, if I come to you again for the same question with regards to collaboration methods and your own experience of it.
Yeah, as I said, I think that there are different points in the pathways that charities do it, but the one I want to pick up on here is in setting the research agenda, and through NIHR, the National Institute for Health Research in the UK, there's a series. There's an organisation set up called the James Lind Alliance that runs priority setting partnerships, and what this does is they take people from across the community, from researchers, patients, charities, other funders, to come up with the list of important unanswered questions. And they come up with a huge number of questions, which they then whittle down into a sort of top 10. There's a lot of research that goes on behind it to ensure that we understand which questions have already been addressed or where the gaps are in the literature, but also to understand then what is the priority. And what's really exciting is that those priority setting partnerships often have a charity partner on them, and you get the patient voice coming through as to what is important, and then those lists are published and often are impacting on what is funded by charities, public, and even sometimes industry as to the next breakthroughs that are needed. So I think that's a really nice example of where there's been about over 40 of them which have involved charities. And I think taking that patient voice, but working alongside the academic experts to say, what are the next things that we can and should be focusing on and solving?
Brilliant, thank you. And Stephen, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, happy to. I think UK Research and Innovation is inherently an organisation built on collaboration. We have 9 separate councils within UK Research and Innovation, of which Research England is one. And much of what we do is about collaborating together. And similarly, we as an organisation collaborate with, as I mentioned in comments, with our colleagues in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So that's a very important collaborative relationship. And also we collaborate with our partners in the university sector itself to bring about the kind of change in research that we're seeking. And I suppose in thinking about collaboration, I'd echo a lot of what Sarah said, actually, that shared goals are a really important foundation for good collaboration. And I think if you're not in a position where organizations are really seeking to achieve the same thing, then collaboration is very difficult. So really understanding what your objectives are and sharing that across organizations is really important. And within that, you need to create and foster an environment of trust. And I think that's something that is perhaps been a bit more challenging over the last 18 months, where so much of our communication has become through digital media and much less face-to-face. But building those trusted relationships, and as an organization committing to what you're going to do and doing it and doing what you say, so to speak, is very important in that. And I think the other reflection I would have, and Sarah also mentioned this, that people often say collaboration takes time, and I don't have the time to do the collaboration, or time is a barrier, lack of time is a barrier to collaborating. And I think what that really reflects is a question about priorities and incentives and reward, in that if we all believe that collaborating together creates better outcomes, then surely that should be our priority and we should be making time for that. But I think sometimes we need structures of reward and incentive to actually help support that activity and to make time. So one of the reasons that we include an element on societal impact in our national research evaluation is so that is in itself attached to some funding, the flow of funding, and that means that people have an instrumental reason for doing it over and above the benefits that it brings in terms of outcomes. And we think that's very important to sit alongside that kind of the importance of shared goals in delivering collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Sarah, you did mention some of your struggles or challenges that you face with collaboration. You gave us the example of Twitter changing your profile picture to make you seem more approachable, etc. Katrina, if I come to you, what sort of challenges have you seen with regards to collaboration, in and outside of your sector?
I think that there's a challenge of getting people to identify what the common goal is. So within different disease areas, there's different patient populations that they're trying to reach. And actually, I think one of the things that's exciting about the framing of the Sustainable Development Goals, or looking at these broader areas, is the ability to work across the disease silos to say, something like, for example, pain is important in many diseases, but there isn't a charity set up in so much looking at pain. And so I think I would say it's a challenge, but therefore an opportunity to think about what are the wider objectives in individual diseases or areas that would enable us to collaborate. And this is where the multidisciplinary approach also comes in. So I think it's about how do you enthuse people around a common theme and make them understand what their expertise can bring, which will allow better research with more relevant outcomes to come out of it.
Okay. Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. And Stephen, you mentioned a couple of challenges that you face, one of which being time in terms of collaborating. Are there any other challenges that you face with regards to collaboration that you've specifically encountered?
Yeah, I think when we talk about research collaborations, either inter and transdisciplinary research collaborations or collaborations with organizations outside of the research system, there's always or often a barrier in terms of the language that people use and the way they talk about and frame problems. And so, I think that speaks to Katrina's point of a moment ago that, the challenge of getting to shared goals. And there are often shared goals that are hidden because people talk about them in different ways and they use different language to frame them. So I think that can be a barrier, and that contributes to the time problem, if you like, in that it takes longer to have those conversations when you need to retreat out of your kind of your particular silo and way of viewing the world and start to take on board somebody else's way of viewing the world. And certainly when we talk to researchers about working across disciplinary boundaries and interdisciplinary research, they talk about the importance of a kind of length of time as opposed to the time in the number of days, but the number of days or the period over which those number of days is spread, and the need to kind of have an extended period, not necessarily of constant engagement, but an extended period that gives you time to reflect on other people's perspectives and positions and work out how to bring them into your own framing. I think those tend to be very important foundations for collaboration. So I think this language point and making space for time to think and reflect are both very important in the process of collaboration.
Brilliant, thank you, Stephen. And Sarah, did you want to add anything just with regards to challenges?
Loads of challenges. I could do you a big list, Andy. Just to completely reiterate what Stephen said around language, I definitely think that language is a challenge for us. Researchers have their own kind of discipline-specific language, and when colleagues across Parliament and policy are engaging with topics, they won't have the same level of expertise necessarily as the research community. So that's certainly a barrier. I think, most of our challenges, whilst the SDGs are kind of divided up, most of the big challenges that we're facing today are interdisciplinary. But the research sector generally tends to still work in subject disciplines, as does the policy sector. We've got all of our departments, department for transport, department for education, department for this, that, and the other. So we're still dividing things up in a slightly arbitrary nature. But we're trying to be more interdisciplinary. So I think squaring that circle is another challenge. And also completely agree. I think something that's particularly pertinent for the policy sector as well is timing, as Stephen said. But I think in this context, it's the mismatch between the need in policy and the policy sector, which is next week. Next week I might think, oh gosh, I really need an evidence synthesis on whatever topic it is. But a systematic review will take up to 2 years to produce in the research sector, so we can't get that in the 1 or 2 weeks that we'd need it. I think related to that, and the way research is produced and communicated, there's perhaps sort of a misalignment with the needs in policy. So like I said, we encourage through higher education publication of outstanding publications and new and innovative research, which is fantastic and really, really super important. But what we might need in policy is not an amazing single journal article, but that evidence synthesis or a short evidence synthesis. Are they being funded though? Is there the drive from the higher education sector to be funding and supporting and enabling production of such outputs? I think what's really fantastic is collaboration is working, because Stephen has mentioned a project that Research England is funding, which is the Capabilities in Academic Policy Engagement project headed up by UCL, as he said, and we are collaborating with them and talking to them about how we can work with researchers to produce rapid evidence syntheses, which is just what we need. So lots of challenges, but hopefully that is a concrete example of how we are doing what we want to be doing, working together to address them.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that then, Stephen, what would help, well, what do you think would help alleviate some of the challenges that you're facing with regards to collaboration?
Gosh, well, I think that's quite, it's quite a big question, but I think the sorts of initiatives that Sarah's just mentioned, where we actually start to really try and collaboratively, across stakeholders, address some of these challenges, is definitely an important way forward. And I think, if we take the relationship between academic research and policy in the UK, given that Sarah's raised that as an area where we need better collaboration, I think we are making progress on that. It's not a quick fix, in that it takes time to build these understandings across different sectors about what the needs are and how people best work together. And so, it's very easy to come up with, potential initiatives that you might run and things that you might do to change things. But there is actually no substitute really for a slow process of mutual understanding between different sectors to actually build the tools that you need for collaboration to take place. So I think on the one hand, many of the challenges we're talking about, in the SDGs are terribly, terribly urgent, and we do need to make progress quickly on these things. We also need at the same time to acknowledge that some of the processes that we need to engage in are going to be inevitably slow, and I think we have to start to be comfortable with that, so to try and make progress on the things we can make progress on, but also build the foundations that will allow us to do amazing things in the future as well. And I think, in a sense, the CAPE project that Sarah just mentioned is like that. It's not going to solve, a particular issue this week, but what it is going to do, I hope, is lay the foundations for a more effective system in the future, so that in a year or two's time, we will be able to solve the problem that needs solving in a week. So I think it's important to have those two timescales in mind.
Brilliant. And Sarah, I could see you nodding along there. Did you want to add anything to Stephen's point?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Stephen's saying around that mutual understanding, and I think also kind of compromise and meeting in the middle and understanding how the other works, how other sectors work, and talking about how we can do that compromise. So I think what we've seen in government in the past few years, and what we're working to develop and have begun developing in UK Parliament as well, is something which is called the areas of research interest. So I said, our problem is we want something tomorrow, but the problem is rigorous research takes years to produce. Parliament, a government and Parliament is developing areas of research interest, and this is really a way to develop a statement or a list or a product or a document which lists either a government department's research interests, research needs, or indeed a Parliament at the moment, a select committee's upcoming research interests and needs. So we're not saying we need this tomorrow, but we're saying we think this is going to be important to us. We'd like to know more about this down the line. And there's a much longer time frame there, lead-in time for researchers to be able to look at what we've identified as our upcoming and future needs, and to be able to work with us to develop, co-produce plans for developing the research to be able to support. So I think that's where we're really mindful of the differences between our two working cultures, and we're trying to come together to address them. So mutual understanding, but then also working to try and shift processes where we can to work with the other.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. And Katrina, if I just come to you, did you want to share your thoughts on how you think you can, or how the issues that you face with regards to collaboration can be alleviated?
Yeah, I think sort of picking up on both points from the previous speakers, I think, as I said, it's about shared understanding. So I think there is no substitute for, in some ways, getting people in a room and giving them time to understand others' perspectives, the language point. And I think one of the ways that is successful in doing that is the creation of sandpits, where as a funding call, you bring together people for a couple of days to work through something, but it is a massive time commitment. So I think that there is a trade-off there, but it does foster, I think, then better projects where you have all viewpoints considered at the outset. And then I also wanted to pick up on sort of, I think, a responsibility of policy side and the funders to identify what the future needs are in terms of that foresight piece, which I think again should be done in collaboration with the academic community, patients, etc. But I think that there really is a need to have a broad core base of things that are funded, so that then when things become relevant, there is the expertise. And I think, a perfect example of this is the COVID vaccine, which, people say was created in 17 months and all of that. But, there is a large understanding that that was based on 20 years of funding, from MRC, from charities, that then enabled the UK to be in a position to scale up and run with the AstraZeneca vaccine and Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, when the time was here. And I think, as good as foresight is, there are things that you cannot predict, and therefore having that broad academic base that enables you to draw on things as you need them is also really important, rather than perhaps focusing on some of the more apparent needs in a short-term way.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a very interesting point, actually. I'm aware that we are coming to the end of this session, so I've got a long list of questions that I would love to ask you. But would you mind just providing your closing remarks, I guess, and sort of your key takeaways that you want our audience here to draw from this session? So, Stephen, if I go to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think what I hope people take away from this is that there are some challenges around collaboration, but there are ways of thinking about and addressing them. And I'm going to just leave you with one kind of final comment about the different ways that researchers and people in society who are trying to tackle some of these challenges frame problems. And researchers are very focused on what's not known, on where the gaps in our understanding are, and that's perfectly logical for them to be the case. But when you actually get out into the world, what you need to know is what we do know and what the options for solutions are. And I think that crossing that divide is a really important way in which you get effective collaborations for societal change, which is what we need for the Sustainable Development Goals.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And Sarah, if you wouldn't mind, just some closing remarks.
Yeah, so I just would hope that I've made it clear that policymakers and policymaking and in Parliament and colleagues I know in government, we need researchers. We need people to share their research evidence and insights with us. And I know we've all seen that through, through all the big challenges that we're facing in society today. But just to really reassure and encourage researchers that we need you. I think secondly, don't feel intimidated. In a way, us all being on Zoom has made things leveled the playing field a bit more, because that fancy, impressive policymaker is just half of the computer screen like you are now. So, we're all in the same boat. So don't feel intimidated by engaging with policy and policymakers. If you think it's not for you, it is for you. Also, I think, let's challenge our misconceptions around the challenges of collaboration and other collaborative partners. And let's also not just think about huge collaborations and big and impressive collaborations, but let's also work towards the small interactions, the phone call, the email exchange with someone from a different sector as a collaboration or the beginning. So those would be my closing comments.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sarah. And Katrina, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think I would just say, I think sessions like this are really exciting to, see people talking about this and know that it is on everybody's agenda. I think the more that we can do that crosses those boundaries, different sectors, different academic interests, will lead to better developments for the populations and the people that we're trying to reach. And I would say, it's about treating all the viewpoints with equal weight. And so if there are ideas that you come up with, or there's things that you think could be relevant or used in other areas because of where your perspective is, I would really encourage you to sort of reach out and talk to people, funders who may be able to make that relevant to their communities of interest. And I think the other thing is, as of today, I'm really hopeful. I think that there are new ideas coming on board and new ways to collaborate, and that we are breaking down some of those silos and those barriers, and that, you know, this is needed to reach those next goals. And I look forward to seeing it happen.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'm afraid we're bang on time. We're out of time, unfortunately, but it's been a super interesting session, certainly from my side. So a huge thank you to the three of you. We really appreciate your time, and I hope the audience has got some key takeaways to take with them back into their own respective sectors. So that's all from us. So Bob, I can hand back over to you.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks again to a fantastic panel. So now we have come to the end of the symposium, but I'd like to extend thanks also to the additional speakers that we had in the earlier sessions and to all of the attendees who have joined us from around the world today. I hope everybody has found this insightful, and hope we've all noted some very practical takeaways, as we've just heard now summarized, that we can utilize to help boost our collaboration effort, and particularly play a part in speeding up our progress towards achieving what may still seem a long way away in terms of meeting as far as the SDGs are concerned. So I'd like to finish up with a few takeaways that we've seen over the course of the event. Starting with the earlier sessions where we saw impact is a useful way of tracking SDG progress. Using real-world objective measurements, we can demonstrate both positive and negative impacts. For example, constructing a new power plant may have positive social and economic impacts in generating jobs and revenue, but it could also have a negative environmental impact. And then when considering the SDG 2030 target, setting one goal backwards in order to speed up progress towards another cannot be acceptable, especially with those tackling areas such as the climate crisis balanced so precariously currently, which is when impact can be a vital indicator of what's working and what needs to change. Next, breaking down boundaries is very much a key to our success, whether that's geographical, political, demographic, historical, as we've seen, particularly in our international panel, or between different sectors. The sheer quantity of great work that is taking place is inspiring. However, this also needs to be opened up and made accessible, particularly in situations we see, such as in the Global South. Furthermore, there are many great ideas the Global North can take from the Global South. They're just less publicly available. For example, we've seen the sort of work being carried out in India and South Africa, particularly towards social betterment and the climate. Climate was the SDG that we saw least progress towards by universities in the Times Higher Impact Rankings earlier this year. So other institutions can consider adopting some of this best practice. This is one area in particular we hope to address with trackimpact.org, so I would encourage everyone to have a think about how they could use that to collaborate better. Collaboration is happening, but it needs to happen much faster, as we've just heard in the last session. We need to adapt new ways of working together, many of which we've explored today, to unlock our collective potential and speed up our SDG progress. Whether that's adapting new methods of communication, connecting individuals and organizations in completely different sectors and geographies, or just sharing best practices from diverse regions to inform global efforts. There are many good reasons to have hope for a more sustainable future. And in the last session, just the themes that were coming through around language, whether that's technical or overall, the barriers that need to be overcome, trust, the difference between reform and transform we heard about, balancing local versus national collaboration, time came through as a consistent theme, and solidarity and the rigorous efforts that are needed for collaboration. So as we now wrap up, finally, I'd like to extend again a thank you to all our wonderful speakers across both sessions who have brought so many insights to the table today, and a final thank you to all our attendees who have braved some unhealthy hours to be here with us from around the world. We will be sending out the recordings and further information after the session. And don't forget, we'll shortly be releasing the complete impact survey, which you saw snippets of earlier on in the break, to gain some more insights into how the landscape is shaping up. And we encourage you to be one of the first to have a look over the project started to be published on trackimpact.org and to get involved from the outset as well. It looks like we've actually finished bang on target. So those of us remaining, we do have allocated or allowed for some extra time. So for some questions, whether that's in the chat or we may be able to open them up alternatively. If you're going to leave us now, however, then thank you very much for attending. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to send your feedback forms back to us. That would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, I'd also like to point out that our next major event will be on November the 9th, and that's the Climate Challenge Cup. This culminates in an innovations showcase and award ceremony, which Vertigo Ventures is sponsoring, and will take place during the United Nations 2021 Climate Change Conference, which I'm sure you've already heard about and we'll hear lots more about, which is COP26, taking place in Glasgow, Scotland. So there's more information on our website, vertigoventures.com, so please look out for it there. Otherwise, thank you and goodbye to those of you leaving now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, everyone. I suggest we give it till 10 past, maybe. I think people are just starting to drop off now. I don't think there's going to be any questions as such, so that's all right with everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so another minute or so.
Great. Okay.
Okay, I think we should shut down in 5, 4, 3, 2,